Tony, Dave, can you hear us? Tony shaking his head.
Dave?
Dave, can you hear us? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would like to call to order, and I need a motion to amend the agenda to include resolution 10A by Mr. Reagan, seconded by Mrs. Steiner. Any discussion? Yeah, motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
I would like a motion to approve the amended agenda by Mr. Reagan and seconded by Mr. Fay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It's carried, okay. So the approval of the minutes, I need those to be a motion to approve the minutes. By Mr. Perkins, second by Mr. Tanisha. Any questions or any discussion on them? All in favor? Any opposed? Next up, we have the National Registry of County Buildings. Nancy LeFevre. We have Randy and Christine, and I just, your name is first. Okay.
They're gonna be on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah. Can they turn their cameras on? Are they? Here we go. Randy. And Aaron. There's Randy. So we have Randy Crawford. I'm gonna put my glasses on before I say it. Crawford of Stearns and Crawford Architects and Preservation Planners. We have Christine Bush from the Preservation Services Director of the Adirondack Architectural Heritage, ARCH, and Aaron Tobin, who is a brand new, day one on the job, Executive Director of Arch. He's the former Director of Policy and Preservation at the Preservation League of New York State. Thank you for joining us. So some of the background is that, oh, and we have Lance. Sorry, Lance. And Lance, he's like this a picture. We have a committee. Linda Casterly and Brian Thompson are the two other consultants on the committee. And we met June, I think, this summer, talk about the sheriff's house and or the jail. At the time, we didn't know that they were connected by one story, I guess, addition, and they joined one another to put it on the National Register for the purpose of possible grants for repurpose and restoration. And in the course of all of that, we worked with some people and talked to some people, and it came out that the courthouse and the service building, we call it the county clerk's office, it's got a couple different names, would probably be better served as a district, in our opinion, because it's by one grouping, the county, and the funding would be open for all the buildings versus just the sheriff's house. So the process for that begins with submitting research on the properties, seeking preservation. I'm just going to read because I'll press and then go all the info. To determine if there's historical significance, and once that is established, it moves on to the application and the deadlines for meeting that. They only meet 4 times a year, the review committee, and they meet in March, June, September, and December. So I did that research. I submitted it to, his name is Dan Bagro, and he's a historical analyst for the New York State Parks and Rec, and he said that yes, all three buildings are eligible, do have significant history for national. And in the course of the last time Randy was here, we actually found the sheriff's carriage building. It's over there still from back then. So if we go ahead with the district, we'd like to add that too, I'm sure. So that's the process and how it works. And we're at the part of the process where we would put it forward to an application with your approval of either just the sheriff's house singly or all the buildings as a district. It just include this government complex. There were some questions about some buildings that were on the National Register that had some restoration or modernization. Like the Lisbon Town Hall has had several different upgrades to it. The Lisbon Depot Museum has a bunch. The Lisbon Library, the Lisbon UPC Church, 3 or 4 in our community that have had upgrades, additions, new windows, doors. One even has siding, which is like a really bad thing for historians to see. But so there is that part. And I guess maybe Randy or Christine or Aaron would explain to you some of the pros and cons as far as being on the National Register. Opens it to grant. Not sure if they, can you hear me? No one ever says no, they can't. Christine, do you want to talk to them about that?
Well, just a little bit. You know, I will say I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing what you said. The audio, I guess it might just be my computer, so I'm not quite sure. You may have covered some of this. But as Nancy was describing that, yes, being on the National Register of Historic Places, both on the state and the National Register, would open you up to be eligible for some grant funding, other types of funding that might be available. As far as just one individual building versus a district, I think it's much to your advantage to have all the buildings within that district that would be eligible to be put on the register. You don't know what future funding you might want to do down the road or any sort of work on those buildings. In terms of specific grant funding and how that might work, I mean, Aaron, you might be able to speak a little bit more to that than I would.
I'd be happy to. Right now, I think that there's really mostly advantages to getting designated on the National Register as a historic district because it will open up the most funding opportunities for the buildings that the county owns that are already eligible for the National Register. So the county can then apply. The main source of funds is the Environmental Protection Fund that runs through the State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. And those are funds through the Regional Economic Development Councils for rehabilitation, restoration, building improvements. So that would be a real advantage to the designation. And if any of those buildings needed additional study, my old workplace, the Preservation League, has grants available for a building condition report or historic structure report through their Preserve New York grant program. So there's fundings both for study to figure out what you need to do to the building, but then also through the state for bricks and mortar work.
Randy, do you have anything to add to it?
I think probably the order of magnitude would be worth noting. The EPF grants you can ask for up to $500,000 if it's an especially large project. I believe you can ask up to $750,000. And to be honest, I couldn't tell you what the ratio would be. The very worst, it would be 50-50. And if the census tract worked out right, the state could pay 3/4 of a project, you'd pay 25%. And with these grants, I should probably add that the EPF, for example, you have to be on the National Register to apply. And for other grant sources, other funding sources, you get, let's just say, an extra gold star or two if you are on the National Register.
Right. Someone from Canton, well, I shouldn't say from Canton, someone in 2018 put the courthouse to an application for the National Register, and it was determined eligible. So the courthouse is already determined eligible for the National Register. So I don't know who did that, but I did find that in the research that someone had put that on. So, question?
Any questions?
No, not from Jim. Anyone else? Jim?
I want to thank your panel for taking the time to join us. I just was wondering if you could outline to us the advantages and the disadvantages, just so that we have a better understanding of the pros and cons.
So when you ask that, are you asking the advantages of being a district versus singular, or of being on the National Register versus not being?
Well, why don't we go through the disadvantages that we might also experience, and then we go from there.
Oh, I'll take that as raising your hand, maybe. I'm not sure the disadvantages of being on the National Register. I really don't think I've seen any. But do you guys, in your experience, have?
I can jump in because working with other counties and municipalities, there's often a real concern that there's going to be additional restrictions placed on the buildings if they're listed on the National Register, either individually or as a district, that the county would have to go through an extra layer of review should they accept state or federal funding for work that you're doing on the building. And the fact that you already have eligibility for the National Register, and eligibility is something that has both been determined, but then can be determined in the future. It goes through the same level of review, whether you're listed or merely eligible to be listed. So the fact of qualifying means that the state will review proposed work using state or federal funding. And then there is some people, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, which used to only kick in if a building was listed on the National Register. It now also looks at eligibility. So seeker is another thing, if it's an eligible or listed property, it means that you have to fill out a long form and assess if there's going to be an adverse effect as well. And that happens again, regardless of whether it's eligible or whether it's designated. So really the designation, you've got the sticks kind of either way. What the designation does is it, for these funding opportunities, that the county can just choose not to take them. But, and with the opportunities, there'll be that additional oversight of making sure that the work is done in accordance with standards. But, maybe Randy or Christine can jump in too, that it's not as though the state expects you to preserve your building as an intact museum with period bathrooms and never make another change to your building ever again, but it just needs to be done thoughtfully.
Yeah, and all three have already been determined eligible to be on it. So they're already those hoops to jump through.
Thank you, Aaron. I think, as a lot of other owners of historic buildings have discovered, the state, if they feel that you have a historic building, and you're using public funds, they already hold you to, preserving these historic standards. And I know that, over, the many years that, the county has, done various renovation projects, it's worked very hard to preserve the historical integrity of these buildings. And, when we look at them, we can see what a wonderful job has been done over the years to make this not just a terrific administration building, but an example of the period architecture that it represents. And, I think since we're already going to be held to those standards, whether we become a architectural district or not, there are real advantages to us of participating in this program where we could get access to additional state and federal funds to help the county make the improvements and put these buildings to their best uses. I don't know what the majority of the board will decide it wants to do with some of the space, but I think that we should not look at the historic preservation issue as the great evil boogeyman that many people seem to think it is. We should recognize it's a great opportunity to both harness some of the funding sources that are out there, get involved some of the folks who are on this Zoom call with us who have a great deal of experience in helping to make these projects work, and to preserve what's best in St. Lawrence County's history and help make this a asset to the county so that future generations can visit this complex and see and learn about the historical figures that made up St. Lawrence County government over the many years. And I think, with the sheriff's house and the old jail especially, there's some terrific opportunities there to capitalize on some of the parts of our history that many people aren't aware of. I mean, the top floor of the jail was once held they once used it to hold Asians who came across the border illegally and were warehoused up there until federal authorities came. There were hangings in the between here and the sheriff's building. There, and that wasn't even in any of the buildings. And some of the earlier sheriffs were very colorful figures who, Sheriff Backus, for example, captured a pirate and only one arm working after the Civil War and wrestled him and dragged him off to the county jail here. There are great stories to be told, and we ought to take this opportunity to tell them.
Any other questions?
And you didn't want me to speak.
I know, I should have known that.
Not a question, but a comment. When we met, the Buildings and Grounds Committee, we met last August.
July.
We discussed it. There was a desire expressed at that time to preserve the sheriff's house, the maintenance, the sheriff will be the San County Historical Association, or the county and historical. However that worked out, there's an opportunity for some office spaces above. There's opportunities in jail that want to take advantage of for storage. So I think the interest is there to restore it and probably make the whole thing a historic district. Because
Repurpose it.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy.
On to emergency services. Oh, hi, Matt.
Hello, everybody.
I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with New York State Office of Homeland Security for a fiscal year 21 emergency management performance grant. Moved by Mr. Denisha, second by Mr. Smithers. Go ahead, Matt.
This is our fiscal year 2021. It's for $45,867. And this is.
Excuse me. Yeah. Matt, can you speak up or speak closer to your microphone, maybe?
Let me switch microphones and see if that helps. I think that's what happened. Not any better?
Try it.
Can you hear me any better now?
That's better. Is that better?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
All right, this is for fiscal year 2021. It's our EMPG grant, Emergency Management Performance Grant, for $45,867. This is going to be
That's not better. Matt, how close are you to the microphone?
like 2 feet.
Get closer. I'm just, it starts out clearly and then it kind of, and that's my interpretation, it kind of drones off and it's hard to make out the separate words that you're saying. Can't hear you at all.
Is he across the street?
Yeah. I haven't come over,
Ask him to come over.
Do you just want to come over,
please.
please?
I'll be right over.
Good. Kevin, we need a little sound
That
system.
sounded better.
You're the money
We've got a
bags.
little, discussion to have.
I just made the suggestion that across the street, and you seconded the motion. Money's up, see how much money is AJ.
You know, that owl thing they have at the town of Potsdam works really well. I don't know if it's working for this bag.
They use it, that's what they use for CSE meetings now.
Oh, really? Are those mostly Zoom, the CSE meetings?
Which is great.
Well, I haven't been to one in 5 years.
Jason's got a discussion too.
Since before the flag.
Kevin, do you have any elevator music?
Excuse me?
Elevator music. Never mind.
It's just saying.
I got a new computer and I'm having issues with trying to get it adjusted. All right, I'm gonna start from the beginning again. First one is our 2021 emergency preparedness grant. Our EMPG is for $45,867. We're using this to offset newspaper costs in the office.
Okay, any questions for Matt? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services Office of an interoperable and emergency communications for fiscal year 20 statewide interoperable communications formula grant and modifying the 2021 budget for emergency services. Moved by Mr. Perkins, seconded by Mr. Denisha. Matt, go ahead.
This is our yearly sick grant that we get, it's fiscal year 20. It was for $806,143. We're gonna be using this to put towards 2 new communication towers, one in Starlake, one in Cranberry.
Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next up, I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Untitled Life and Safety Solutions Corporation for the 911 system and professional services. Moved by Suzanne Fiacco, seconded by Mr. Perkins. Go ahead.
All right, what this is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Entrado. Entrado is the vendor that we're using. This is for our 911 system, so if somebody calls 911, it goes to this system where all the dispatchers answer. This is the signed contract. We're gonna have multiple contracts with this. The first one is for this first year is gonna be for the equipment, which we're using one of our grants, our PSAP grant that we use every year. We're gonna use that up for that, and then after that, it's gonna be for maintenance for every year, and that's roughly $40,000 a year. They've agreed to do a new contract each year. That way, with our grant funds, we can use grant funds for contracts that were put together for that fiscal year. So I can't use the grant funds to pay for something 7 years in advance. So we have to do a contract every year. So this would be a blanket resolution to let the chair sign the contract every year for maintenance and the initial purchase.
Any questions? Mr. Akins.
So Matt, how did we run across Untitled Life and Safety Solutions? Was that RFP or what?
It's not RFP, it's their vendor we've been using for a while, and it's not state contract pricing, but it is something in there. Dylan could probably answer that better than I could, because we've been going back and forth on this.
They're purchased off from a cooperative purchasing organization. It looks like it goes back 2013, 2014. There may have been an original competitive process that was done from that. So we have the equipment, we have the software. This is an upgrade.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Next up, we have a discussion about the emergency services supplemental plan.
All right, this has been a discussion that's been going on amongst us all here for a few months. We all know that St. Louis County has some issues with EMS, getting ambulances out the door and everything else. Several of you have reached out with concerns and stuff like that. So we've kind of put together a committee of some EMS leaders here in the county to kind of come up with some ideas. I took some key notes that I just wanted to go over a few of them with you. The vision is for every resident of St. Louis County to receive a timely, high-quality professional care during the most significant time in the pre-hospital setting. The mission of this whole committee was to support existing ambulance services, supplement their needs, and develop resources to enhance the current system that's here now. In general, EMSs across the county can't respond to different situations at appropriate times because of staffing levels. So what we're doing is we're putting together a plan trying to help how we can do that. Most agencies cover on the first call of their own district, where we're running the problems the second call. Yes, there are some districts that have trouble with the first call too during different timeframes, but we're looking at plans to try to offset them with support. There are concerns right now with the current system we have over the next 2 years. The numbers of volunteers are declining, call volume is increasing, our growing response times and administrative burdens that we put in the system. We have 19 ambulance services here already in the county, but manpower and staffing for them is a huge growing concern. 8 of the departments are fire department based, 10 are independent, nonprofit, and we have 1 commercial. The group of EMS leaders, like I said, have been meeting to discuss different options. We've also been meeting with other counties and getting ideas that other counties have had. We've also been meeting with the Department of Health. Kind of put together a think tank type view. Why reinvent the wheel? St. Lawrence County is not the only county that's going through this in New York State. There's a lot of other counties there. 15 out of 57 counties in New York State have some sort of county-run or organized EMS system improvement program in place. Most of the ambulances most of them are ambulances, but a few are ALS first responders, which would be like a fly car or something like that, or staffing paramedics on fire trucks and stuff.
Did you say 15 or 50?
15, 1-5.
1-5.
Are currently right now in the same process where we are trying to develop some kind of plan. 9 counties are already there. 9 counties have already done it. We spoke to them. Like I said, why reinvent the wheel? Different counties, we can put together things that they have, trying to put them together for what's best here in St. Lawrence County. Those 9 haven't declared, part of the process is for us to declare a countywide CON. 9 of them are getting ready to. They're only waiting on equipment or a little bit of funding to put the CON in place. 1 county is actively doing it, and they have been for a while. They're kind of been a blanket for all the counties to look at. We currently have an average of 18,000 EMS calls a year. In 2020, 94% of those calls were answered. 6 calls went. At the beginning of this year, in 21, it was 93%. And then this last, the numbers are pulled, not exactly, no, it's less than 93 for this last few months. So we're seeing a growing trend of calls that are getting turned over that we're not be able to do. We did schedule a joint meeting with the EMS and Fire Advisory Boards coming up at the end of November. We're going to hold that at the training center, get all the groups together and kind of go over a lot of things and hear concerns on both sides. We've invited all of the EMS agencies in the county, all the leaders and chiefs to come in and kind of have a powwow, discuss it, kind of give them options out there, what's out there, what other counties have done, and kind of an idea that we have here in St. Lawrence County.
Okay, any questions?
Must have been good, they didn't have any questions.
You did well.
Because you're live, because you're live.
And I'm gonna sit here for the rest of them because you're not gonna hear me if I go across the street.
Thank you, Matt. So moving on to Jason Saltenhauer. Hi, Jason.
Good evening, everybody. Just want to check my audio. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks all right. Okay, sounds good. I'm in the same building that Matt is, so I don't know if it's building related. I guess not.
Okay. I have a resolution modifying the 2021 budget for the planning office for community development block grant, CDBG, coronavirus aid relief and economic security class fund. We have moved by Mr. Sheridan, seconded by Mr. Perkins. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you. So this resolution will establish accounts in the county budget for the CDBG CARES grant that the county has received. And we will use these funds to augment our lead grant that we've spoken about in the past.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, we have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a sub-recipient agreement with the North Country Housing Council, Inc. for the delivery of SLC CARES Housing Rehabilitation Program, moved by Mr. Perkins, seconded by Mr. Sheridan. Go ahead.
Thank you. To go along with this resolution, I just would like to give you a quick update on the lead grant and where we're at with it and how the work is going with our current sub-recipient, which is the North Country Housing Council. In the past, we've given you updates on a pretty regular basis. Haven't done so in a couple meetings now, but have made some really good progress since the last update. 2 units have been completed in the last 6 weeks, bringing the total up to 9 units. 3 more are going out for construction, or the construction should begin this week. And we have 2 more bid packages that have been sent out to contractors. So that's really, really good progress from where we've been at in the past. We're using the funds from the resolution that was just spoken about to augment this program, because the grant that we're using now, which is another housing repair grant, is being exhausted. Some of these projects are really cost heavy, so we're running out of funds to supplement the lead grant. So again, that's a great thing that we've got these additional funds. Working with the Housing Council on the projects, we've made some good progress with that entity. They've assigned additional staff to help with the projects, and we're seeing real marked improvement with production and just the work process. So with that, that's the rationale for using the Housing Council to continue. It's really a continuation of the grant, and identifying them as our sub-recipient for this project.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Mr. Denisha?
Question, just a comment. I would, North Country Housing Council, Jason, as some of the information I've received, I think they're doing better. I'm still disappointed that they're the only choice we have. But it is what it is. But keep your eye on them. We're paying them a lot of money, and I want to make sure that we're getting what we're paying for.
Yes, agreed. Will do. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Next, we have a DOT funding for transit discussion.
Yes, thank you very much for allowing me just to speak briefly on this topic. We received notice from DOT too late to get a formal resolution on this agenda, on the operations agenda. So we'll be bringing a resolution to you at Finance that will modify the budget to accept $74,990 in accelerated transit capital funds. These funds can be used for rehabbing, restoring, or modernizing, any public transit asset. So the intended use for these funds is to improve the GPS systems and the camera systems on the buses that we have. Some buses currently don't have cameras. We'd like to see all buses have cameras and also GPSs and other upgrades. So that's just, I guess, a precursor. Just wanted to let you know that resolution will be coming before you in 2 weeks' time at Finance.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Jason? Seeing none, thank you. Oh, wait, Dave has a question. Dave, before I say, go ahead.
Thank you. Jason, the buses do an advertising plan program. What does that generate annually in revenue?
About $144,000 a year is what's budgeted in revenue for the advertising component of the bus system.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all I needed.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much, Jason, for
Thank you. Have a good night.
the, you too. We're moving on to the public defender, James Mcgann. Madam Chair, I believe people have one of his attorneys stand in. Yes, I believe he shared with us. He got married last weekend. Oh, yes, he did. I believe we do have another attorney. Did you see that? One moment. Okay. There we go. Mr. Barrow. Good evening.
Zoom. Oh, hi. I apologize. I'm terrible with Zoom. I'm used to using Teams.
Oh, okay. Good evening. So I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a memorandum of understanding with Deacon Criminal Justice Reform Center at Southern Methodist University Denman School of Law to participate in the engaging program in defense efforts and outcomes in New York. Moved by Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Perkins. Go ahead, Mr. Farrell.
I apologize. I'm not intimately acquainted with that particular caseload study. That being said, I've always found it to be very important that, I would just note that in terms of basically involvement in these type of caseload studies where it's being done by New York State or other agencies, we actually tend to be one of the few rural counties that does take part in those studies. And in that sense, I think it's very important that we continue to do so, just in the sense that we ensure that as basically state assistance or basically state funding for assigned counsel programs continues to expand, that we ensure that that's being done in a manner that is not specifically catered towards obviously the New York, the 5 boroughs or to the other kind of more urban areas in the state. So in that sense, I think it's excellent that we continue to take part in those type of programs.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Secondly, I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services to accept the Aid to Defense Grant for October 1st, 2019 through September 30th, 2020. Moved by Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Perkins. Go ahead, Mr. Farrell.
I apologize, again, my lack of experience with Zoom. Again, basically, this is just ensuring that we continue to receive that Aid to Defense grant. Again, it's being utilized to fund some of our obviously our office is kind of bifurcated between family law and criminal law at this point, but again, that's funding is utilized to basically pay for criminal law attorneys.
Any questions? None on the screen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Next up, I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services to accept the Aid to Defense Grant for April 1st, 2021 through March 31st, 2022. Moved by Mr. Denisha, seconded by Mr. Akers. Go ahead, Mr. Carroll.
As the case is with the other DCJS funding, again, this is being utilized to fund some of the, criminal attorneys in our office. Nothing too exciting there, same deal as before.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Farrell? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign an amended contract with the New York State Indigent Legal Services for the provision of funding associated with the implementation of Senate Bill S8114 and the Assembly Bill A10706 an act to amend the county law, the executive law, and the state finance law in relationship to indigent defense services. Moved by Mr. Burke, seconded by Mr. Denisha. Go ahead. Mr. Farrell.
Again, this is just more state funding for, again, the expansion of criminal law representation, again, utilized to fund the criminal portion of our office.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Next up is the Board of Elections, Jenny Bacon and Tom Nichols. Here is Mr. Jenny. Tom. Come here, Tom. Okay. All right, go ahead. So I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with NTS Data Services for renewing voter registration, signature digitization, full document imaging, election reporting, and interface messaging system maintenance and the support of the Board of Elections. Moved by Mr. Burke, seconded by Ms. Bianco. Go ahead, Ms. Jen.
As this is a resolution, we have decided to go with a one-year contract. There's other companies currently that are working on getting their certification with the state. This right now is one of the only acts in town, and they aren't providing the greatest service and aren't providing as good a service as we had when we first went with NTS when I started at the Board of Elections 15 years ago. So we decided to go with a one-year contract to wait and see pending certification from some other vendors offering the same service.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next up, we have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Infotech Research Group for its research and advisory services to comply with cybersecurity regulations for the Board of Elections. Moved by Mr. Perkins, seconded by Ms. Haggard. Go ahead, Jenny.
This resolution is signing the contract to go along with the cybersecurity grant remediation that we had a couple of months ago. And if there's a lot of questions on this, I would really have to defer to Rick Johnson from IT because he's been going through all of this. This is just to another contract that we need in order to be in compliance with the cybersecurity regulations for the state board.
Go ahead, Rick. Oh, I can't hear him.
There we are.
Okay.
I couldn't unmute it first. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So as we talked about in September, this is basically authorizing the chair to sign the agreements that that we already discussed. So these initiatives are in place to, there was an audit done about a year and a half ago, and then a company came around to assist counties with how to spend the New York State sponsored grant money to address the cybersecurity concerns. They were very individual from county to county. These solutions were tailor-made for each. All have been approved by the State Board of Elections. The two before you this evening, I'm sorry, I don't mean to get ahead, but this one is for Infotech. The next one will be with network experts, and they address, the first one addresses a disaster recovery policy. So they will spend focused time here for 1 week and hand us working with us, hand us a disaster recovery plan, which is a critical function of a cybersecurity policy. And again, do you want me to address item C, or have you vote on B first? I don't want to get out of line here.
I'd like to vote on this one if we could. But first, does anybody have any questions for him about this? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. So the next resolution is authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Network Experts in New York, Inc. for network segmentation in order to comply with the cybersecurity regulations for the Board of Elections. Moved by Mr. Perkins, seconded by Mr. Denisha. Go ahead, Rick.
Same general approach. This particular part addresses something called network segmentation. Basically what it does is it builds a stronger network for around just BOE. It's pretty good how it is. This makes it even better, and this is something I know that the state Board of Elections is favoring in counties all across the state. This particular arrangement is the installation of certain things to get that to happen, and then the services to constantly remotely monitor that to make sure that it's doing its job and that nothing bad is getting in.
Okay. Any questions for Rick or Jenny? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Dave, do you have a question? Dave, you're muted.
May I ask one?
Sure.
Jenny, there was an article or something I saw on the reporting, the delayed reporting for St. Lawrence County and also Jefferson County. Is that basically the reason for Resolution A? And are you both using the same vendor?
It actually has nothing to do with NTS. It was actually our network that we couldn't get into. So Rick came in that night. We were able to come up with a solution, but it had nothing to do with the vendor. We are both using that same vendor, but it had nothing to do with the vendor in that particular situation. It was not being able to connect securely to our own system. So we've got a new system in place where we're going to test that day so that we know, because we do it right now a week ahead of time. So we're prepared, and there was a change. So that's what delayed it. We did come up with a remedy and get those results. It was Canton that was really delayed, the Canton, Potsdam, the closer ones that are used to getting their results by 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Yeah, right.
And so we had a delay where we didn't get things up immediately. And if you clicked on our link, it didn't work. We just had it on our direct page.
Yeah, I was just trying to follow it and it just seemed like it wouldn't come. So and Jefferson kind of had the same issue, or?
I don't know exactly what Jefferson County's issue is, but again, it wouldn't be NTS, the vendor, because on election night, that's through our voting machine system and where we do our programming, and then through the county website. And where we had trouble was connecting with the county website.
Yeah, election night is definitely the night to shine, so.
You bet.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Everyone else is good?
Thank you.
Okay. Next on to probation. Good evening, Mr. LePage.
Hello.
I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign an agreement with Language Line Services, Inc. to provide interpretation services for St. Lawrence County. Moved by Mr. Burke, seconded by Mr. Akers. Go ahead, Mr. LePage.
So right now, a few departments within the county have used language learning services, but it's never risen to the level of needing an actual contract. Probation just found out we're going to be getting a client for 10 years for a sex offense, and he does not speak any English. So we're going to have to use these services for the pre-sentence investigation, for the sex offender evaluation, and then for visits, drug testing, and everything else that's going to come along with it. So it's going to raise to the level of where a contract's actually going to have to be signed. So that's what we're asking, is for the chair to be able to sign that agreement.
Any questions, Mr. Akers?
Tim, can you tell us the cost of the contract will be?
So each language has its own cost, but the majority of the languages are about 75 cents a minute. This is a state contract with this company. So most languages are about 75 cents. Sign language goes up quite a bit, and there's a few other languages that are a little over $1. Still nothing crazy, but most of the languages are about 75 cents a minute.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? Mr. Perkins?
Thank you. Tim, is this mostly for actually language or for disabilities? Is it for like people that don't only speak English?
So they provide a bunch of different services. It's not, it is interpretation services, but they can do it a variety of ways. So it could be hearing impaired. So they do stuff on video, they do stuff over cell phones and all that kind of stuff. So it could be for the hearing impaired also, I would believe.
How much is this costing us at the present?
Like you said, right now it's a state contract, so it depends on the language and the needs. But most of it's about 75 cents a minute that I found.
So like last year, how much did it cost us in the previous year?
So Dylan and I did a little bit of research before contacting the company, and I know one department used it maybe 2 times, and the cost was only $20 to $30 each time. So the cost has been, I don't think the county spent over $100 to $200 a year at all.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, everybody.
On to Johnny Dorothy, Human Resources. Good evening.
Good evening. Are you ready for me to speak?
I'm sorry?
Are you ready for me to speak or?
No, just 1 second. I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with Burnham Benefits Advisors for healthcare consulting and related actuary services. Moved by Mr. Lightfoot, seconded by Mr. Perkins. Go ahead, Jenny. Thank you.
Hi. So with the support of the Healthcare Committee, I am looking to extend our current contract with with Burnham Benefit Consultants for another 3 years. We went out to RFP in November of 2018 and reviewed 9 other vendors at that time, with Burnham coming in with the lowest cost with respect to the benefits that would be provided. The services include healthcare benefit plan review and comparison with alternative options, financial and actuarial services provided monthly, quarterly and year-end reports, analyzing the plan expenditures, presentations of opportunities for additional programs to decrease costs, review of IRS, ACA, and other compliance regulations, mandating reporting and other regulatory compliances. The cost savings initiatives Burnham has provided over the years since 2017 have resulted in over $6 million in savings. So I'm just requesting that we are able to sign another contract with them for another 3 years.
Does anyone have any questions for Jenny? Mr. Akers?
Oh, I see it at the bottom. I was wondering about the cost. I see it at the very bottom there. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract with the Public Safety Psychology PLLC for psychological evaluations for police officers and deputies. Moved by Mr. Burke, seconded by Mr. Perkins. Go ahead, Jenny.
There.
sorry about that. So I didn't realize we were gonna talk about this tonight, but so what's happening here is, as of October 30th, as of October 3rd or 16th, there's been new regulations put in place where all police officers, including our deputies, have to have a background psych evaluation performed in order to be hired. This is a post-offer but pre-hire condition. And I'm finding with all of my peers throughout the counties that there's a real shortage of psychiatrists and psychologists that can perform these. I have found this organization in Albany. It's out of Albany, and it's called the Psychiatric or Psychology. Sorry, right here in front of me, PLLC, and they're willing to do this, and they can meet all of the DCJS and the MPTC, which is your Municipal Police Training Council, regulations to, and they can do this for $325 per exam, per evaluation. The evaluation consists of 2 written tests, which we would provide under their direction, we as in Civil Human Resources Department, in our office under the direction of this company. And after they finish these tests, we would then send them to this company. They would review and give the candidate a call. We would set up the Zoom meeting and coordinate it here in our office as well, in a confidential area. And they would then do the face-to-face evaluation, which is also required. And then they would present us with a report on that. And so we're requesting that we're allowed to use this organization.
Does anyone have any questions? Oh, Dave, go ahead.
Johnny, in the state system, correction officers too have to go through a psychological evaluation. Why not in county level?
We do. What this new law is making us do is to go through the psych evaluation, and it was effective October 16th.
But this resolution at least just shows police officers and deputies. So correction officers are also included then?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think the state corrections does. I do not believe the county level right now correction officers have to.
Okay.
I do not believe they do.
Okay, probably just a matter of time then. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
Anyone else have a question? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
Next up, our sheriff. I have a resolution authorizing the chair to sign a contract for the fiscal year 21 Operations Stone Garden Program OPSG grant from New York State Division of Homeland Security and modifying the 2021 budget for the sheriff's office. Moved by Mr. Perkins, seconded by Mr. Lakewood. Go ahead, Sheriff.
Good evening, everybody. So this is our annual Homeland Security Federal Stone Garden Grant that we receive every year. This year's amount is going to be $300,000. That's by August of 2024. As always, this grant provides enhanced cooperation between our agencies, federal, state, and local, through joint operation on the Canadian border. You have to have the nexus of 90 miles to qualify for this grant through the federal statutes. Our office, the sheriff's office, would receive roughly $88,000 from this grant. City of Augsburg would get approximately $33,000. Town of Norfolk about $16,000. Town of Messina about $33,000, and then the 3 state agencies that partner with us, the state police and park police, DEC, total of about $130,000. So overtime, technical equipment, automotive supplies, patrol cars, and various other equipment. So I'm looking for this to get passed.
Okay. Anyone have any questions? None up here, none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much, Sheriff.
If I could, just to answer Dave's question, Dave, the last question, this new procedure was This is all stems from the Police Reform 203 executive order. That's where this all came from. So whether it filters down to the state corrections, I'm not going to be sure, but this is this has been created through that police reform. So this is why you're seeing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, I have a resolution for St. Lawrence County Board of Legislators to call upon Governor Catherine Hochul to remember how the people of Ogdensburg and St. Lawrence County helped the state, New York State, and keep Ogdensburg Correctional Facility open. Moved by Mr. Reagan, seconded by Mr. Lightfoot. Mr. Reagan, do you want to speak to it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The resolution that you found on your desk today is similar to the past resolutions that this board has passed. The difference is that it's been announced that once again, Ogdensburg Correctional has been put on a hit list for possible closure. This happened once before when Governor Patterson was governor, and the people of Ogdensburg and St. Lawrence County and the North Country spoke as one and convinced New York State to change its proposal, and they kept Ogdensburg Correctional open. This year it's going to be a tougher fight. But I believe that if the people of St. Lawrence County stand together and send a message to the state that the state needs to take a look at what are the criteria they're using to close these facilities. As many of the people in this room know, Ogdensburg Correctional and the other correctional facilities in Ogdensburg and Governor have reputations as some of the most efficient and best run facilities in the state. Over and over again, it's been shown that inmates who participate in the educational programs, the vocational programs, have higher graduation rates. There are fewer incidents of violence in these facilities. These facilities have lower workman's compensation cases, have higher daily attendance rates. The individuals who work at Ogdensburg Correctional and others have shown over the years that they look at their positions as a career, not just a job. I'll never forget several years ago when I had the opportunity to visit after one of the big snowstorms, and some of the prison officials mentioned to us how Albany was surprised that such a high percentage of the employees showed up for work, because downstate, after a little snow, they had to hold over the workers from one shift to another to keep the place staffed. But here in the North Country, our workers, it's just another day. So the point that all of us should be making in the days ahead is that New York State gets a great bang for the buck by having these prisons here in St. Lawrence County. Our employees are among some of the most motivated and hardworking and dedicated career people who both uniformed and civilian, and they take great pride in their jobs. And many times when I've had the opportunity to speak privately with some of the inmates, they told me they feel safer at the facilities here in St. Lawrence County because the officers, you know, go out of their way to try to make a safe environment for everyone, because the officers at the end of the day want to go home to their families, yet keep a safe environment at the prisons. So I would ask everyone to join me today in passing a bipartisan resolution to send to the governor, to ask her to reconsider, to ask our leaders of the Senate and the Assembly to reconsider this bad policy, this mistaken attempt at efficiencies, and for the state of New York to take a look at what facilities in the state need to be closed because they don't provide the kind of safe environment for both inmates and staff that people in the state have a right to expect. So this is just the opening salvo, I believe. It will be a difficult fight, a long fight, but I think that if the Albany thinks that we're gonna roll over and let this just happen, they've got another thing coming. I think the people of Ogdensburg and St. Lawrence County are gonna stand together and fight and make Albany aware that we're tired of seeing the cuts happen here while places like Rikers continue to be dangerous places for both inmates and staff, when if anyone in state government actually cared about what happens to the people, the incarcerated people, they would be making an effort to move those inmates into some of the vacant spaces in the state facilities in order to provide better services and make the streets of New York State safe once again. So thank you.
Thank you. Tony, you had your hand up first.
Thank you. I'd just like to be added as a co-sponsor, please.
Okay. Dave?
Rita, I'd like to be added as co-sponsor also. Jim, I echo your concerns. To me, it's a little bit different. When I was a kid, we rode bikes through the psych center grounds. They had a little store there. You go get the hot balls and stuff for a nickel. And I remember when it was thriving. And now I watch and I see it. The big barn that sits out by 37, dilapidated, laying down, just rotting. I look at all the old stone buildings, dilapidated, just rotting. We're talking about saving a jail, historical. And I look at those old stone buildings on the psych center grounds and I say, oh my God, it's just unbelievable. What's going to happen to the jail if it does close? And it's just going to be another case of New York State just throwing us nothing and letting it deteriorate. So it's a shame. I have a lot of friends that are correction officers, customers, clients. It's a shame. It's a fight that's been going on. I would be curious of the 6 facilities that are closing, where Ogdensburg ranked in the ranking and how they ever do come up with this, because you think of these properties highest and best use afterwards, and some of these places can turn them into something. I just fear it's just going to be a shamble, letting them deteriorate. So I support it wholeheartedly. I know it's a fight that's been going on forever, but it's just a shame. So thank you.
Mr. Burke was next.
I also would like to be added as a co-sponsor. And years ago, when they were trying to close this facility, Chuck Kelly had said that that's about a $21 million boost to the economy of Ogdensburg and St. Lawrence County, in a county that is as impoverished as ours, this is very important, and I think the points Jim made are excellent.
Okay, thank you. Next up was Mr. Sheridan. And then,
I'd like to also be added as co-sponsor, Madam Chairman.
okay,
I also just like to make one statement to try to put some things in perspective here. There was a time over the last 20-some years, or 30-some years, that inmate population in the state of New York was up to 72,000 inmates. That's also about the time that we really realized we had a really high crime rate in New York City. That 72,000 has now gone down to a whole, I think it's $31,000. There are 31,000 inmates, and that is that's probably going to continue to decrease in terms of the numbers. And at the same time, the crime rate is spiking, skyrocketing, out of control in New York City. So I would like to be added support.
Mr. Langsford?
I also would like to be added, and just another comment, I think part of the rationale on the part of the state for doing what they're doing is a law that was just recently passed that requires inmates to be closer to their homes, not sent up here to, the Great White North, as some of them put it. So I think that, that's going to work against us too, and it's something that's going to need to be addressed when it comes to that. So I certainly would encourage everybody to also vote for this resolution and try and save this jail. There's been, from Legislator Forsyth, Legislator Reagan, and others, perfect justification for it. If nothing more than to retain the beauty and the grandeur of what remains of an architectural monument down there that they've let go to where. And it's a sin the way that that has been allowed to deteriorate when here several years ago, Senator Ritchie attempted to get the state to turn it over to the city so that it could be developed and used and retained and maintained. And the state has sat on it and done nothing. So I'm hoping that whatever happens, that we can save it and hopefully couple saving the rest of those buildings that are there, convert them to some kind of useful use. Thank you.
Mrs. Hager was next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I had the great privilege of teaching at the Augsburg Correctional Facility for 8 summers. And I'd like to second everything that Mr. Reagan said about the quality of the staff, the safeness, how well the facility was run. And not a day that I worked there was I ever in any sort of fear or anything like that. It's a wonderful organization of people that work over there. And I, of course, will support this.
Mr. Delusion?
Sure. I'd like to be added as co-sponsor as well. And just a quick thing about what Legislator White just said in regards to housing incarcerated closer to home. So something from lost there because people aren't going to prisons because of country clubs. They're going there because they've done something wrong. They're going to serve a sentence. But I think about we've got some prisons in New York State that are sitting on some of the most expensive real estate in the world. And not just New York State, in the world. And New York State continues to preserve those prisons. They're truly interested in cost, in saving money. Get rid of the prisons that are sitting on that prime real estate and use the prisons. Use the Watertown Correctional Facility, the Augsburg Correctional Facility, Clinton Correctional. We've got lots of them that are low cost. I think to save some money is Yeah, I think it's.
Anyone else? Mr. Akers?
So I support the resolution, would ask to be a co-sponsor also, but I would point out that the resolution says to remember. There's nothing in that, in the language that actually asks the state to actually reconsider. So I don't know, Mr. Reagan, if that's on purpose at this particular time, but
I'm perfectly willing to accept a friendly amendment.
so would you like to fashion that? The language, it's your resolution, I would support it. I would think, Madam Chairman, that on the now therefore be resolved, and after that, it can be further resolved.
Yes. Call
Reconsider.
upon Governor Catherine Hochul to remember how the people of Ogdensburg and St. Lawrence County helped New York State, and to reconsider the decision to close Ogdensburg Correctional Facility.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Lightfoot. All in favor of that amendment?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Akers.
Does anyone else have a question before we, Mr. Perkins?
I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor, please.
Okay, did you want to speak also?
No.
No.
Good enough, second.
So all in favor then of the amended resolution?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Reagan. The county administrator's report.
Couple items to update you on tonight. Just a quick COVID-19 update. If you are watching that percentage that barely moves each week, we are currently at a 55.2 full vaccination rate. So I know that many of you like to share that at your town and village meetings. We are currently at a 6.37 positivity rate as well. The county over the last several days has been impacted again with 3 departments with multiple folks with positives, and we're addressing those as we normally would, cleaning and making sure they have coverage. Over the weekend, we had 92 positives on Saturday, 40 on Sunday, and 47 today. So those numbers, again, start to seem to decrease, and then we get days like the 90 or back in the 80s. We just can't seem to get where we see a lower steady rate. As you may be aware, the final approval went through. So first we saw the FDA approve, then we saw the CDC approve, and now we've seen New York State Department of Health approve vaccination of Pfizer for 5 to 11-year-olds. So the St. Lawrence County Public Health Department has coordinated an event this weekend, November 13th, from 9 until 4 at St. Lawrence University in the field house. They will be including, because they're asking for the 5 to 11-year-old population, but they will also make available 12 to 17 as well as 18 plus. They're asking for registrations online, but also they'll be including the local college mascots. They'll have 2 of our local canine units, Sparky the dog, and some firemen on site, so that hopefully we can distract any trepidation that folks might have as they come and the children are being vaccinated. Emergency Services Director Denner spoke tonight to the plan they've been working on. A lot of work has gone into collecting some information, pulling together the data to support a well-informed discussion, not only in this boardroom, but countywide. I think interest tonight was just to let you know they are pulling together the work on that. They will be putting that in front of Emergency Services group first, and then they will bring that to operations next month and unfold exactly what they're thinking about and what they would recommend. And that will be followed by a more local conversation at several of the departments around the county. So a little bit less of a formal setting, questions can be raised and answered, suggestions, ideas can be offered. It's certainly something countywide that we all share as a concern, and we all know requires a means to be addressed. We do have the opportunity with some funds to address it. So I think having a well-informed conversation countywide is critical, and certainly the work done by the department, I think you'll be impressed by, and certainly help to further that conversation and develop a plan for 2022. Thursday, as I mentioned to you, but as a reminder, the offices at the county will be closed with the exception of our 24/7, 365 offices in honor of Veterans Day. As I mentioned to you last week that we were working on, Operation Greenlight is in effect, and when you leave tonight, you will see that the tower is lit up green. So we'll be sharing photos, but it's a bright, vibrant green. We also will, as I said, we'll be closing our offices, but also we have finally placed signage by twos at each of our Canton buildings for veterans. So there's some VIP parking that is going to be available for our veterans, and they will be at public safety, over here at the courthouse, at the H.B. Smith Social Services Building, as well as at the Human Services Center. So we'll have a little gathering on Wednesday to celebrate that and make sure we get some information out in the press. Certainly we're very proud to honor our veterans and thank them for their service. Certainly goes well beyond county lines, but this is the way that we can demonstrate our gratitude. Wanted to give you a brief update on the Bonadillo group. They will arrive tomorrow, the on-site Wednesday as well. They'll do their intros and then they'll also travel to Ogdensburg to meet with the staff there. Because they'll mainly be working out of the Canton location, we wanted the Ogdensburg staff to be first, have an opportunity to meet with them, have a conversation, so that if, even though they are in a different location 20 miles away, they're included, they're involved, and certainly their input will be valued. Next week at services, I will provide you at least with what we know so far about the pilot on our move to Ogdensburg and how things are going there. Next week at services, further on this agenda, after vacancy, you'll hear a little bit more about the 2022 tentative budget. But next week, we'll review 7 departments at the Services Committee, and those include Community Services, Office for the Aging, Public Health, Social Services, Veteran Services, Weights and Measures, and the Youth Bureau. So if you've had an opportunity to take a look through, tonight we'll also be providing to you the department summaries, and those are used for those reviews. If you have questions ahead of time, send those along if you can. It gives us time to be prepared. If not, and you want to pose a question that evening, we're certainly happy to return that information and share it out with the board. We want to make sure every question that you have about the budget or concerns raised are addressed in a timely fashion. Also at services, we'll have a short discussion presented by Heather Rand on the training program for Children's Services, specifically when and how employees are trained for the field, along with the statistics that you've all become accustomed to for the last few months. But I have been meeting with the supervisors, and if you've noticed in the report, as was prior to this latest revision, we have about 6 pages on Children's Services and about 2 on eligibility. So I've asked the other units to pull together some of the ideas that they have for relevant information they'd like to see shared. I also, and certainly would take your suggestions. And if you think back, we started looking at this, and I started talking to you about changes we wanted to make around March or April. And by the time we were able to look and roll out a competent document, it was August with July data. So as we look at this and we try to figure out what we want to share with eligibility, we'll look to bring that to you around January timeframe with December data, if we're able to do that. So you have some time, if you have some suggestions, if your constituents have brought questions or thoughts to you about what might be valuable to share, please let us know and we'll make sure to add that. Last week, I met briefly with Chairman Akers of the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Funds Committee. That group will be convening soon to begin their work. And any of the information we're seeing come out right now, it's coming out as sort of a frequently answered questions. What we're told is that there may not be a final rule that's going to be provided as a result of all of our great input on the interim final rule. But as those come out, we'll continue to share those with you so that everyone has a level of information about eligible and ineligible uses. And tomorrow we'll roll out a survey, both of county residents and of internal county employees to seek their input, to see how much information they have about these funds, and also to take their suggestions about how they might be used. And then lastly, at finance, my hope is I can bring you some information on the legislative agenda for 2022. As we talked about earlier in the year, I'd like to summarize the first 5 years that we've done, although we did do some of that in the 2020 agenda, but also have a December consideration for a January adoption, if the board's agreeable. Because I believe in this first budget that Governor Hochul's going to be putting together, that our input should be valued and down there in front of them early for our state representatives. So I'd like to keep to that schedule unless there are other circumstances that prevent that from occurring, but that's what we're working on. Are there questions? Ms. Hacker?
Thank you. Mrs. Doyle, you mentioned that you were going to have a survey. How do you do that?
So it will be on our website.
Okay,
We'll ask our friend from the Watertown Times to help us get the word out.
so people would have to go to the website and,
Yes.
okay,
Click the link, yes. And it's an
Okay.
electronic survey. It will also have open-ended questions for them as well.
okay, great. Thank you very
And for our
much.
internal staff, we'll have that on our intranet.
Thank you.
Mr. Burke?
Bruce, I'm wondering if for next week, we could also have the, maybe some stats on the number of people who have left, either by retirement or just simply resigned. And also, the ones that have done exit interviews, if we could take a, as we try to understand what's happening, I think all that information is relevant. So if we could have maybe a look at the exit interviews, unless it's confidential, I don't think it is, but.
No, and I think we can make sure that's updated on your Google Drive as well.
Yeah.
There's a graph, and I think there is some of the language included in some of the responses, but we'll make sure that's uploaded and current for you as well. Were you, can I ask a question? Were you looking for all the departments to be presented next week, all those departures, just as a metric, take a look at departures?
Well, at least enough so that we have some idea,
Sure.
you know, that as to why people are leaving, and you know, and maybe some numbers too, because at some point, if turnover continues to be high, you know, it probably warrants closer attention and maybe some kind of a plan as to how to retain people.
Absolutely. And I think if I could just add, I think Legislator Forsythe asked about some follow-up from numbers that were provided in some dialogue that took place at the board meeting. We were able to determine that there were 3 departures. I believe the number that was shared was 8. Now, what I think that could be from or mistaken by is a transition. As you know, you've approved some senior caseworkers, you've approved some grade B supervisors. And so in that transition, many of you have made observations in the data about a drop of 15 cases and then a pickup of 15 cases. Often that is when a caseworker is going into a promoted position. And so there is a transition between folks, but it doesn't mean they left the agency, it just means they left that role. So we can take a look at that, but I wanted to clarify, Dave, that number we could confirm was 3. Other questions? Mr. Lightfoot.
Which side were they on?
I believe they were on CPS,
CPS?
Yep.
Not the prevent side?
not prevent side.
Thank you.
Other questions before we move into vacancy? Or would you like me to go ahead and do that? Okay. So we have this evening 3 departments set for consideration under vacancy. There are 7 departments that the Vacancy Review Committee took a look at on November 2nd. There were 10 vacancies considered. Tonight you'll consider 3. At services next week, there'll be 2 departments, and then at finance, there'll be 2 others to be considered. You see in your summary there. There are on this agenda, or in this summary, 2 abolish and create, which is a net 0. There is 1, I'll just remind you that in community services, the board has been very generous in providing the opportunity for that behavioral health clinician, rather than when a social worker or a mental health counselor depart, that is the pigeonhole that they're only allowed to look for. So by creating the behavioral health clinician, we're allowed, and the department's allowed then to look at both or offer both. And then the best candidate for the position then can be hired, and that position accordingly, they have different numbers, so an internal process, are able to be hired in that way. So that's the create that we're talking about tonight. So the first one is the sheriff. He has an abolish and create. Brooks?
Thank you. So I'm looking to abolish a civil account clerk and make it into just an account clerk position. As you know, in the last almost 2 years I've been sheriff, I've been restructuring the civil division. I made our civil officers into deputy sheriffs. The chief civil officer, when he's leaving next year early, we're going to make a position to a deputy chief officer, police powers. Last month, we switched our senior account clerk and just to a account clerk. This is kind of the last piece of the puzzle to move this position, abolish it, and do the account clerk. In doing so, I just want to remind you that we used to have 3 account clerks at one time. We only have 2 working in the division. They are very busy with garnishment papers, evictions, and all everything else they have to account for. And I think Ruth made a great point during vacancy that with the building project that is going to proceed, the civil division will be on the first floor, and they'll probably be the first area where the public comes to them and greets them. So there's going to be more contact and a little more busy for them, but we will handle that. And we're changing from one unit to another. The civil account clerk was in the jail. We're trying to move them into CSCA. It just makes more sense. They don't work in the jail anymore. And we've just morphed into a different situation for our civil division compared to when they were looking for this build.
Questions for Brooks? Okay, thank you, Brooks.
Thank you.
And emergency services?
The only position I have tonight is I think it's more of abolishing an assistant and creating a secretary one. Our admin assistant in the office is retiring here, and she's not counting down, but there's 9 working days left for her. So it's abolishing that when we do canvas letters out, so we're hoping to fill that in the next one.
Questions for Matt on that transition? Okay, thank you, Matt. And then last, I believe Mr. Farrell is still with us. We have 2 positions with regard to public defender's office. Go ahead.
Yes. At the outset, I would note that both of these positions are fully funded by the state. Otherwise, they are criminal law positions. Unfortunately, we had 2 attorneys leave and move on to greener pastures. But again, I would note these positions are fully funded by the state.
Questions on public defenders? And they're both, I believe, relocating. Often it's unusual to see 2 attorneys depart. Okay, thank you, Mr. Farrell. And just before we move on, unless there's any other questions on vacancies, I would just like to give you a brief update. The board has, I think, been very gracious in providing me the opportunity both to fill probationary positions as well as temporary positions when warranted. Not that we haven't run into the occasional glitch associated with these, but what it has done is twofold. It does not leave the seat vacant for very long, if not an overlap provided when there is institutional knowledge that we feel critical to make that transition. We've been able to get some folks in a little bit before. One story I can share, and I think Mr. Lightfoot's aware of this, we actually were able to, we have a long tenured employee who will be retiring from our support unit in social services in January. They were able to go ahead and interview and offer the position to be taken, and they'll begin training next week. That will allow training from someone who's been in the role, not only as a unit supervisor, but also doing the work for a very long period of time, I believe in excess of 20 years, over to another employee with some period of time. I think that gives them at least 6 weeks to work together. So that is what has been intended. But to the numbers, year to date, and this combines some that would have overlapped from 2020, which was when the board provided this authorization. There have been 59 shared either probationary or temporary created. This month, there have been 9. So that's 6 in the temp role and 3 in the probationary role. So I certainly on behalf of the departments appreciate the ability to do that. And certainly as we continue to find ideas that make good sense for the departments to continue to work, we'll bring those to you. That is all I have for vacancy, unless there's questions. Okay, so then if I can, go right on to the tentative budget overview. I'll have Dylan pull the screen. Particularly because we have Zoom attendance, pulled a few slides together. I'll do this for each committee, broadly overviews. Sticking with the 3 goals that I announced to you in the budget presentation, and they include recover, reinvest, and redefine. And those are really going to be the driving forces of many, if not all, the conversations that you'll hear from me But in doing so, I wanted to share with you sort of some broad strokes associated with the overall numbers, and then dig in just a little bit on appropriations and revenue with the departments that you're hearing from tonight or have questions for tonight, and their FTEs. So positions, just as a reminder, positions are bodies, FTEs are portions of. So you may have one person who may be divided by FTE into 3 departments. And so when you see 2 decimals, that's when a position is shared. So when you see those increases or decreases, those could even be hours in some circumstances in the way we've hired some folks. So looking at the first slide that's up on recover would be with regard to our budget. One of the themes I think that was well communicated to me by the audit committee, who fortunately hasn't had great reason to meet with terrible frequency like we did a few years back. But if you look here at the county cost, what that's demonstrating to you, that almost flat line is what the levy's been doing. And what you can see with the green bars is the overall county cost. So that's the cost associated with running county government as a whole. And the levy, the white line that you see across there, is what we're asking county residents to pay. Not a bad deal, if you ask me. So you're looking at the actuals. So often the danger we have in budgets is we do our best guess. We put all the information we have, we run all the trends we can, we take all the formulas we know how from the state or whatever funding agency we have, and we put those in to try to make good sense of what we're asking you to appropriate for the following year. But what really matters, and what you're tasking all these department heads to do, and I follow up with, is to manage the budgets that you've adopted. And that's demonstrated here without drastic change, in my opinion. This last year, I think no one could have imagined what we needed to spend, what we needed to budget. And coming into 22, we're trying to stabilize that again and deal with what we know, but what also we're forecasting or what we can predict. So that's in your appropriations. And likewise, the next slide, we're talking about the recovery in revenue. So we spent a lot of time in 2020 talking about the withholds, what revenue we weren't going to get from the state because they weren't sure of their revenue. We've heard all kinds of bombastic challenges the state had with expectations of revenue, which didn't prove out. So for us, unlike many counties that are revenue or retail dependent, we didn't see the dramatic decreases. New York City, we couldn't compare to New York City's loss in revenue. However, what we're seeing is a slightly modified from the projected to the tentative for next year. But again, the illustration I'm making to you is that almost flat line with county levy of what we're asking the taxpayers for. Looking back as far as 2017, you're seeing that hover right around the 200 million number. That is a combination, obviously, of federal, state, local grant type revenues coming in. And again, that white line demonstrates, again, a pretty good deal if you ask me. Next slide. Now, in both the recovery from COVID, as well as looking at the services and the needs of county residents, we have, if you look back to 2017, we were at in the low mid 700s. Each year in the peach color at the end of that line, and this is illustrated in all of your budget books by department and an overall one in the front, you can see a modest increase each year in FTEs. So we had some dramatic decreases in the years prior, and we worked diligently to do abolish and create. So often we try to maintain a net zero. And this year, you've seen that probably in all of those years combined, the amount we've added in 2021. So we're going from this year, 2021, of 808 up to 839 in areas where services were required and where people were necessary. I think the board took a look at where we were. Certainly social services has been an area that's seen the most dramatic increase. The overall increase for the county is 31.05 FTEs. Next slide. And so now when we look at reinvesting, that's part when you look at the FTEs. Departments here fall under that criminal justice umbrella, if you will. So you're seeing a modest increase in most of your departments. Conflict defender, district attorney, indigent defense, probation, public defender, And then the sheriff obviously shows a 10% increase. Remember though, we were able to settle the contract with corrections that we had not had in place since 2018. So those have reflected a catch-up in the wages of a contract as well as going forward into 2022. So we currently have 3 contracts open, 2 you just approved or that will expire at the end of 2021. At this board meeting, you took action on 2 of those, and negotiations continue with the 3rd, which is the Deputy Sheriff's Association. Next slide. Again, with reinvesting, the balance of the departments that report here, you've got the 2 that are always a little tricky if you just look at the sum on a quarterly basis. Board of Elections, as you know, receives their chargeback, so it always skews how much it looks like they've spent. But if you look at those categories in your quarterly reports, you can see they actually spend in each of their categories, the revenue just outpaces. And likewise with the county clerk. Slightly modified down the revenue for their downstate revenue. But one bright spot in the county clerk is we have just been notified on a temporary basis that all of the renewals that are mailed in will be sent to St. Lawrence County for processing. And that I think is as a result of some challenges they have with staffing on their end. Now, we don't know how long this will go on, but our expectation is, much like we do all the business that we do here, they'll do an exemplary job, and we certainly will bid for our ability to continue to do that work right here in St. Lawrence County. Emergency services, you can see their increase there. Human resources, information technology, and planning. Next slide. And then I think you've got the breakdown here of personnel by department. Again, the criminal justice umbrella of what you've got. Remember, in the sheriff's department, you have both the deputies as well as corrections. In conflict defender, district attorney, indigent defense, probation, public defender. Now, remember, conflict defender, public defender, and indigent defense are working through their 5-year plan. In the last few years, they've seen increases in their staff. They've each seen a new attorney, and I believe they've each seen, if not only conflict defender, has seen increase in clerical staff. Next slide. And then I leave you with reinvesting in the personnel change on the balance of those departments, Board of Elections, County Clerk. You just approved the increase of the 2nd Deputy County Clerk, who's just been affirmed and sworn into office. Got emergency services. And when you see that, I believe it's 0.02. Again, those are hours. In many departments, emergency services, sheriff, Board of Elections, they have hours associated with their part-timers. So we made some adjustments to those as well. Human resources, IT, you added the director, and you maintained the services manager and planning. And next. And then I engage you to redefine. Continue to help me redefine what county government is, what it does, and how we better serve residents of St. Lawrence County. Are there questions on operation departments? You have all of your department heads out there virtually who are happy to answer any questions that you have, or I also offer to you if you have questions out of this evening as you look at things. Please feel free to send those along. I don't mind answering a question about operations department at a later meeting. I will. Any questions? Okay.
On the committee report, thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Deweese, the agriculture and farmland inspection one.
Their last ag farm inspection board meeting, the tentative concern that came out was the Horizon company that setting a contract in St. Lawrence County. It actually turned out not to be really good. The big issue was missed off. They came back for small farms. And but there's a
Thank you.
the 3 farms that are left are going to be picked up either by Burberry, Syracuse, Organic Valley, or they're going to be moved. So we're supposed to go on the market for the milk, which is a very positive thing.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. DeLucia? Seeing none, on to the alternatives to the incarceration board for Mr. Burke.
I missed the last meeting. Tim LePage did a presentation, a slide presentation, on the DCJS grant. And we applied for the maximum amount, which was $28,421. And it's to offset, partially offset one of our employees' costs. And that's all I have to report.
Okay, thank you. Board of Trustees for Supreme Court Library, Ms. Bianco.
No update at this time.
No, thank you. Thank you. The Emergency Medical Services Advisory Board, the last time that we met, we talked about this program that we had seen in other places. We had a discussion about Livingston County and Shenango County. Livingston's been doing this sort of assisted program in the beginning with their lack of services. Now they've moved into having their own ambulances, and I think they go around the county now, and they're pretty successful with it. Shenango County is starting to come online. They're renting some ambulances from people and using those to do this stuff. So we talked a bit about that. That was really the biggest part of it. And our next meeting is on November 30th, and it's going to be a joint meeting between fire and EMS to discuss this. Any questions? Environmental Management Council, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Our last meeting was on October 20th. Our presentation was, and I'm not going to be able to say the last name, but I'll do my best, Peter Delahash and Ashley Grosso from the Division of Lands and Forests, Region 6 from DEC, and they presented on conservation easements. In St. Lawrence County, we have 323 miles that are for non-motorized rec trails, 218 miles snowmobile trails, 55 miles ATV trails, 57 miles motorized roads and trails, 24 campsites, and 28 miles on the St. Lawrence County multi-use trail system that are designated under conservation easements. And I found it very interesting. They said each one of the easements is technically its own contract and it has its own set of rules. And so they advised that people make themselves educated before they go on to a conservation easement. Some of them have certain requirements or parameters around hunting, around years, months of the year that you can access, what you can do on the property. So those can be found on the DEC website or through the Potsdam office. And then some other highlights, and they showed us several examples of some St. Lawrence County conservation easements. We were able to see the flora and fauna, so it was nice to see those pictures. They also talked about the extended producer response. This is separate. This was in the Conservation of Resources Committee. The extended producer responsibility with single-use plastics and the Senate bill that's supporting that. The Potsdam Climate Smart Community status they brought up, as well as highlighting some other opportunities for communities across St. Lawrence County to participate in being designated as a climate smart community. The Environment and Economy Committee talked about the public service announcement that they're doing to make recommendation about fish ladders on the Grass and Oswegatchie. There's a final draft that's supposed to be presented to those communities. They also talked about Atlantic salmon stocking efforts in Oneida County, as well as the deer management program about the hemorrhagic disease that's in Franklin County and I'm sure at some point headed right towards us in St. Lawrence County. And then finally, the Invasive Species Committee and Watershed Management Committee gave us an update about the Black Lake draft and some work that's going to be done by GEI Consulting on the Black Lake Management Plan. There are presentations being done by the planning office. John Tenbush and Dakota Casserly will be doing some presentations in the towns of Morristown and Maycomb. And they're also doing a Black Lake Summit via Zoom on November 15th at 6 o'clock. And then I would invite everybody to sign up for the CLEAR workshop. It's the third virtual public session that's being offered November 9th at 6 o'clock, and that is also a virtual meeting. And I can share that information with any of you. Our next meeting is on November 17th at 6 o'clock.
Any questions? Anybody seeing none? Okay, thank you. Fire Advisory Board, Mr. Denisha.
Our last fire advisory board was scheduled for October 21st, but it was postponed due to lack of people. Chair Curran said there's going to be a joint EMS fire advisory board meeting on Tuesday, November 30th, and our next fire advisory board meeting is going to be December 6th.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Denisha? Okay, seeing none. Inter-County Legislative Committee is always like the third, usually the third Thursday. And at the last minute, I got a little, hey, this month it's gonna be Tuesday, so I didn't get to go. They met in Lake Placid. They talked about the different things that are being done in that county to promote, tourism, and the fact that they're still waiting on some plan to build the Midway. Midway, I guess, is still not rebuilt on the Fiscal. So they discussed that a bit, and that's for that. And the next one is coming 18th this month, a little early because of this day. Any questions? Good, thank you. Jury Board, Mr. Sheridan.
There is no update at this time.
Thank you very much. Planning Board, Mr. Bank.
Planning Board usually meets the second Thursday of every month. This month with Veterans Day, the meeting has been moved to tomorrow night, and I have no report since our last update.
Thank you very much. Under old and new business, I have and I look at a copy of this. The resolution. Yes. All the way after. Thank you. I apologize for that. Is there a portion? Resolution? Yeah, okay. Just a second. I'll get on there. There it is. Oh, I do. I apologize. I have a resolution adopting proposed local law for the year 2021, reapportioning 15 legislative districts in St. Lawrence County, moved by Mr. Lightfoot, seconded by Mr. Denisha, Sheridan, and Smith. I'll speak to a few more. Thank you.
So this resolution follows the local law process. I believe Jason's still with us if there are any questions out of the last committee discussion. But what this would allow is for us to schedule at the December board meeting, the public hearing, and to have the resolution formally adopted, which then we can file with Secretary of State.
Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Any other old or new business?
Thank you. I just want to quickly bring up, I know we've had a conversation in the past, I know that the mask issue has been divisive. And I know that we've also polled our staff and found that the majority would prefer to not have a mask requirement in the building, and I can totally respect that. I do, however, need to bring up, oftentimes we're given information from constituents that offer us a glimpse into a different perspective. And so one was shared with me, and I just wanted to share it with you and see if we would consider any kind of accommodation for instances like these. So when we come to work, these are adults that have access to vaccine, and so there are different parameters and situations that go along with that. But for our families that are being visited in the home by our county workers, many of these homes have children that are unvaccinated in them, or people that have chosen not to be vaccinated. And unlike when we bring guests into our home, and we could require, if you're going to be a guest in my home, I expect you to wear a mask. These families oftentimes don't have the voice to require that, or are told that, by our county staff that they are vaccinated, so they don't need to wear a mask. And it really puts our families in quite a predicament, because here I have children that I want to protect, but I also have these services that I need or that I'm required to have. And it's also been brought to my attention that we have, again, things that you oftentimes don't consider. We have children that have to have supervised visits that come into a facility that, again, these children are unvaccinated and they're in rooms with adults that aren't wearing masks. And I do understand, I also am vaccinated, and I did that to enjoy all the liberties of being vaccinated, or so I thought. But I sit here right now masked, not because of me. I'm not worried about it. I protected myself with the vaccine, but I'm around 16 unvaccinated children all day, and I could be carrying it right now, and I don't want to expose any of you. So I do that. It's a sacrifice that I make. But I just am wondering, for the consideration of our workers that are out in the field and they are guests in people's homes, if we wouldn't consider protecting these children that aren't yet vaccinated, and not to take our own opinions and put them on anybody, but to just think about the safety of the families that we're serving.
Mrs. Sager.
I can't tell you how much I agree with that. Thank you for bringing that forward. That is the least that people could do. And I think we ought to set a policy. Thank you, Nicole.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to speak? Kevin?
Just a comment. I've been arguing about this. There's really not, in my opinion, any data that demonstrates emphatically that masks work, particularly the masks that you're working with right now. In maybe N95s. The difference between counties that have had masking mandates versus those that don't is a very small percentage. So to tread lightly here, the whole public policy has been that the vaccines have been available. Those that have decided to get vaccinated have done so. And we've had a great system here. Liz Doyle was instrumental in getting the state clinic here at SUNY Potsdam, and that received many accolades. So the people that haven't decided to vaccine, they've taken their own risk on themselves. Those that have been fully vaccinated so that they did not have to wear a mask is also important too. So I go right back to the effectiveness of masks.
Thank you, and I respect your opinion, and I will take it as an opinion, and I'm not asking for anybody to change their opinion. I'm asking that these people are opening their doors to their homes, they have no choice, and they have no choice that we are sending workers to their homes without a mask on, and they don't have the power to say, you need to have a mask on before you can come into my home. And so it's not about opinions, it's about the fact that when somebody is a guest in somebody else's house, I think that they should have to respect the parameters that those people are setting for their own homes. So I think that's, I guess what I was bringing up is that we have families that feel that they don't have a voice other than to tell them to please put a mask on, and if they say, no, I'm vaccinated, they have to let them into their homes right now. And it's a cause for concern that we are putting people in that situation.
Okay, Mr. Burt was next, and then Mr. Delisha.
I agree with Nicole, and I think, if it's the efficacy of the mask, I don't know why we couldn't have our staff wear the N95 mask, so that we provide the ultimate protection. So I agree with you, Nicole. I think it was a good point. I'm glad you brought it up.
Mr. Delisha?
Yeah, I think it's odd, because I do get home delivered meal routes, and I wear a mask. Yes, I've been vaccinated. I don't know if the folks that I'm delivering meals to have been vaccinated. I'm asking, it's not my business. But because I am entering their home, out of courtesy, I wear a mask. And yes, I was vaccinated, so I can enjoy the freedom of choosing to or not. But also, if someone were coming into my home and, I wanted them to wear a mask, that's my right. And I would expect that if we have folks that are coming in from any of our agencies that are performing a service in the individual's home, and they would request to take a mask, I would expect that they would follow through with that request.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak? Oh, Tony, go ahead.
No, thank you. As you well know, and I've reported publicly, I've got the vaccine, and I certainly respect the opinions of, everybody in the room on how they want to move forward. But I think there's no mandate greater than what somebody mandates for their own home. They're generally protecting themselves, their children, anybody with a home, and I think that they have a full right to do that. So I support as well. If we assign people to a home and the people that own that home ask that the mask be worn, I think that we should respect that decision by them.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, Mr. Akers.
Has anyone made any calls to the administration office about anybody that's providing services from the county of their refusal? And how many would that be?
I'd have to go back and look.
Multiple, like over 100, less than 50, 10?
Less than 10.
Thank you.
Did you have something to say, Mr. Sheriff? No, I thought Mr. Sheriff has now. Mr. Smithers, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm against a lot of mandates. I think it's reasonable that if you're going into somebody's home, it's not too much to ask them to wear a mask. Especially if there's children there and they're required to wear masks in school. It can be confusing for children. But about all of these rules, so I don't think it's too much to ask them to wear a mask going into somebody else's home.
Anyone else? If no one minds, I would just say that in everyday practice, a lot of people who have poor immune function are very sensitive to this subject. They feel like if they get COVID, they're gonna die, and they're afraid to be anywhere near somebody without a mask on. And I think that when we're going into somebody's home, if we're a county agency, the balance of power is not there for people to feel safe in saying, like, listen, I'm really nervous about this. I understand everybody's opinion here. I just know from my patients, I have patients who come on with 2 masks on, gloves, and, a little paper shirt or whatever that they want you to try to examine them through because they just don't want anyone to touch them because they're so afraid of this, even though they're vaccinated. So this is one time that I say maybe we think about, or just ask first. Even if we could ask, I need to come over, did you want me to wear a mask? How do you feel about that? Just about. Anybody else? Okay. Is there any other older new business? Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could, just for those at home, I wanted to share a picture of the courthouse. See the green light? Oh, beautiful. When you all leave, you'll sort of be able to see it, but this is Operation Green Light.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Amy. For executive session? We have litigation, personnel, negotiation, and appointments, and personnel is for the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters relating to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation.
Okay. Do I have a motion by Mr. Perkins,